Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes life does not need a huge transformation. Sometimes it only takes a few small changes to shift everything. That is what happened to me. I was not looking for a miracle. I was simply tired. Tired of feeling stuck. Tired of waiting for motivation to knock on my door. And in that moment, I made a decision. I decided to give 1 week to myself. Just 1 week. And what I did in those 7 days changed my rhythm, my peace, and my power. The world does not slow down for you. The clock keeps ticking, the people keep moving, the sun keeps rising and setting, whether you are ready or not. I realized I could not control everything, but I could control my habits. So I picked 5, just 5, and I promised myself I would show up. No excuses. No delays. I did not wait for Monday. I started the very next morning. The first day felt strange. Changing your routine is uncomfortable. But I kept going. And with each passing day, those little changes became anchors. They gave me control, focus, and surprisingly, they brought joy. Not the loud kind of joy. The silent, soft kind. The type that makes you breathe deeply and say, I'm okay now. These habits did not need money, talent, or any fancy tools. They just needed me to be honest, to be present, to be willing. This is the first habit that changed my life. Waking up 1 hour earlier than usual. I know it sounds simple, and maybe even annoying. Especially if you are a night owl or someone who hits snooze more than once. But hear me out. That 1 hour became sacred. It was the only hour in the day when the world was quiet, when the phone was not ringing, when no one needed anything from me, just me and my thoughts. At first I did not even know what to do with that time. I just sat on my bed, staring out the window. But slowly, that silence started talking back to me. It told me where I was hurting, what I had been ignoring, and what I truly wanted. I started using that hour to reflect, to journal, to plan, not in a stressful to-do list way, but in a gentle, what do I want to feel today, kind of way. That changed the tone of my entire day. Instead of rushing and reacting, I started living with intention. I was not just going through the motions anymore. I was leading my day, not being dragged by it. Within 3 days, I noticed my anxiety dropping. My head was clearer. I was not forgetting things like I used to. And even though I was sleeping a little less, I felt more rested. Why? Because I was not waking up into chaos. I was waking up into peace. That 1 hour gave me space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to be. No social media. No news. No noise. Just me. And for the first time in a long time, I started to feel like a human again. Not a machine trying to survive the day. By the end of the week, that hour became non-negotiable. It was not even hard anymore. My body started waking up on its own, excited to start. I would open my window, let the fresh air in, and sometimes even watch the sunrise. It felt like the world was being reborn, and so was I. If someone told me a week ago that waking up an hour earlier would make such a difference, I would have laughed. But now, I know it is not just about time. It is about what you do with it. And when you give your best self the first hour of the day, the rest of the day follows that energy. That habit did not just change my mornings, it changed how I spoke, how I worked, how I responded to challenges. It made me more present, more kind, more in control. And most importantly, it reminded me, life changes, not when the world changes, but when you do. Second habit, no phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. It sounds like a small ask, but it was one of the hardest habits to build. My phone had become an extension of my hand. The moment my eyes opened, even before I fully woke up, my fingers would instinctively reach for the screen. Notifications, news, emails, social media, it all hit me like a flood before my brain even had time to say good morning. I thought I was staying informed, connected, productive. But what I was really doing was handing over my peace, my focus, my control to the world before I even gave it to myself. So I made a deal with myself. No phone for the first 30 minutes. I would not check anything. No messages, no emails, not even the time on my phone. I bought a small table clock so I would not have to rely on my screen. The first day, I almost panicked. It felt like I was missing something urgent, like I was out of the loop, like I was about to fall behind. But as those 30 minutes passed, I realized something powerful. I was not falling behind. I was finally catching up with myself. In those first few mornings, my hands felt restless. They kept twitching toward where the phone used to be. But instead, I held a book, I opened a journal, or I just sat with a warm cup of tea and watched the light change in my room. And the strangest thing happened. My mind started to clear. I was not absorbing opinions, drama, or pressure from other people. I was creating space for my own thoughts. And those thoughts were kinder, slower, and much more honest than the noise I had been filling my head with. On the third day, I noticed how much calmer I felt. My breathing was more steady. My shoulders were not tense. I did not feel that tightness in my chest that usually followed a flood of unread messages or some upsetting headline. That silence, that stillness, became a kind of medicine. I started listening to the birds outside, to the hum of life around me, to my own heart whispering, "You're safe here." I realized that checking my phone first thing was not just a habit, it was a reflex, rooted in anxiety. It came from the fear of missing out, from the need to be in control, from the habit of starting the day reacting instead of creating. But when I took back those 30 minutes, I took back my ability to respond. Not just react. I was no longer starting my day with someone else's urgency. I was starting it with my own energy. By the fifth day, I was doing more with less stress. My mornings became more intentional. I lit a candle, opened the window, stretched a little, sometimes even danced in my room with no music at all. And when I did finally check my phone, I was no longer a slave to it. I was in control. I could choose what to respond to. I could decide which emotions I wanted to carry and which ones I would leave behind. The screen did not own me anymore. The biggest surprise was how much mental space opened up. Without diving into the noise, I had time to think about my day, to feel grateful, to ask myself what I really wanted from the next few hours. I started writing one line every morning about what I hoped the day would bring. Not in a checklist way, but in a soulful, simple way, like, "Today I want to feel light," or "Today I want to forgive." That one sentence shaped my energy more than any to-do list ever had. This habit, this act of quiet defiance against the digital pull, became an anchor. It reminded me that I do not have to begin my day with the world's demands. I can begin it with my own breath, my own thoughts, my own light. Third habit. Writing one thing I am grateful for every night felt almost too simple to matter. Gratitude had always seemed like a nice idea, something people talked about in motivational speeches or printed on coffee mugs. But when life gets heavy, when your heart is tired, when everything feels like a long list of things you have not done yet, gratitude feels far away. I used to end my days scrolling through my phone, comparing my life to others, overthinking every conversation, reliving every mistake. I would lie in bed with a full mind and an empty soul. That is when I decided to try something different. Just one sentence, one honest sentence about something good in my day. Not perfect, just good. The first night I did not know what to write. I sat there staring at a blank notebook. It had been a long, exhausting day. Nothing dramatic had happened. No major wins. No big smiles. But I remembered how a stranger had held the door open for me when I was carrying a heavy bag. That was it. That was my sentence. I am grateful for the kind man who held the door for me today. It seemed small, almost silly, but I wrote it down. And then I closed the notebook and went to sleep. And for some reason, I slept a little better that night. The second night, I wrote about my tea. I am grateful for the warm cup of tea I had in silence. Again, nothing fancy. But I noticed I was smiling while writing it. My body softened. My mind slowed down. That one line became a gentle pause before sleep, a shift in focus, a reminder that not everything was wrong. By the third night, I started noticing more moments during the day. It was like my brain was on the lookout for good things. I would walk past flowers and think, this could be my gratitude tonight. I would hear a song I loved and feel that familiar spark. Gratitude was no longer just a habit. It was becoming a lens. My eyes were learning to see differently, not ignoring the hard things, but choosing not to be blinded by them. I was still facing stress, challenges, messiness, but I was not only seeing that anymore. I was also seeing the light. On the fourth night, I wrote about a friend who texted to check in. On the fifth, I wrote about a laugh I had with a colleague. On the sixth, I wrote about a cool breeze during my walk. And each time I realized that joy was not something I had to chase. It was already here, hidden in the folds of my ordinary day, waiting to be noticed. Something changed inside me. I stopped feeling so empty at the end of the day. I stopped carrying all the weight to bed. Instead, I carried one moment of warmth, one sentence of light. And even on the toughest days, I found something. A moment of quiet, a meal I enjoyed, a memory that made me smile. Gratitude was not erasing my problems, but it was helping me hold them differently. It was reminding me that life is not just a list of what went wrong. It is also a collection of what went right, even if only in tiny fragments. That habit became my daily reset. A quiet whisper that said, yes, today was hard. But look, this happened too. It made me feel more present, more grounded, less lost. It gave meaning to moments I would have otherwise ignored. And without even trying, it made me kinder to myself, to others, to life. Fourth habit is drinking water before coffee might seem like a small shift, almost too small to matter, but sometimes it is the smallest hinge that swings the biggest door. For years, my mornings started with coffee. It was like a ritual, a warm, comforting cup that made me feel alive and capable. I relied on it, even worshipped it, as if caffeine alone could pull me together and launch me into the day. I never questioned it. I never paused to think about what my body truly needed first. Until one morning, I woke up and decided to reach for water instead. It was not an easy change. My brain immediately rejected the idea. It felt wrong, like I was betraying a loyal friend. But I poured a glass of water, sat down quietly, and drank it slowly. It was not magical. It was just different, clear, clean. It felt like I was giving something back to my body instead of asking more from it. That first sip was not filled with a jolt of energy like coffee. It was filled with presence, with care. I had heard before that our bodies wake up dehydrated, that our brains need water more than caffeine, that drinking water first helps digestion, skin, energy, mood. But I never really felt it until I tried it. That first morning, something shifted in me. It was not just physical, it was emotional. It felt like I was choosing myself in the most basic way possible. I was saying, here, before I ask anything of you, let me give you something you need. By the second day, my body actually started craving water first. My mouth felt dry, not just for caffeine but for real hydration. And as I drank, I began to feel more grounded. There was no crash, no spike, no dependency, just this quiet strength that began to settle in my chest. It was not loud or exciting, but it was steady, and that steadiness carried me into my day with a sense of control I had not felt before. The third morning, I still had my coffee, just later, and it tasted even better. My body was already calm, already balanced, so the coffee became a bonus, not a lifeline. I stopped needing it to feel awake. I started enjoying it for the taste, for the ritual, not for survival. That one glass of water changed the energy of my morning. It made me slow down. It made me breathe deeper. It made me feel more aware of how I was treating myself, not just in big ways, but in the tiny choices that often go unnoticed. On the fourth day, I added a squeeze of lemon to my water, not because someone on the internet said to do it, but because I wanted to make that moment even more intentional. It felt like self-respect in liquid form. I began to notice other things too. My skin looked brighter. My stomach felt lighter. My focus lasted longer. I was not jittery or restless. I was clear, calm, and it all started with a glass of water. The fifth day, I realized how automatic so many of our habits are. We move through life, doing what we have always done, without asking if it still serves us. Changing this one habit reminded me that I am allowed to question what I have normalized. I am allowed to try something new, even if it seems insignificant, because often it is not the habit itself, it is what it represents. Drinking water first was me choosing intention over impulse, health over hurry, care over convenience. By the sixth and seventh day, this habit was no longer an experiment. It was a gift I looked forward to, a signal to my body and my mind that we were starting fresh. No rush, no noise, just water, just presence, and the peace that comes from knowing you are no longer running on empty but filling yourself up first. The fifth habit, taking a 10-minute walk without music or distractions, felt like stepping into a forgotten part of myself. I had always walked with something in my ears, songs, podcasts, motivational speeches, something to keep me moving, something to fill the silence. Because silence honestly scared me. It made me feel alone, made my thoughts louder, made the day feel heavier. But one day, out of nowhere, I left my headphones at home. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe it was my mind's quiet cry for stillness. I stepped outside with nothing but the sound of my own footsteps and the world around me. The first few minutes felt strange, almost uncomfortable. My hand kept reaching for something that was not there. I could hear the sound of my breath, the rhythm of my shoes brushing against the road, a bird calling out somewhere in the distance. It all felt too raw, too close. But I kept walking, and slowly, something inside me began to settle. I started noticing things I had never seen before, even though I had walked the same street 100 times. A cracked tile shaped like a heart, a tree that looked like it had a story, a tiny flower growing from a wall that probably should not have been able to grow anything at all. I realized that I had been moving through life with my senses half asleep, always distracted, always elsewhere. But this simple, undistracted walk brought everything back into sharp focus. I was not multitasking. I was not digesting other people's words. I was just being, just walking, just existing in the most honest and quiet way possible. By the second day, I started craving that walk, not for exercise, not to burn calories, but for clarity, for space, for the feeling of being grounded in something real. My thoughts were loud at first, bouncing around like restless children, but eventually, they began to slow down, to breathe, to whisper instead of shout. I would return from that walk feeling lighter, not because my problems disappeared, but because I had finally given them air. I had allowed them to stretch and release, and not stay jammed inside my head. On the third day it rained. Just a light drizzle, nothing dramatic. I still went for my walk. No umbrella, just me and the rain. I felt like a child again, noticing the smell of wet earth, the way raindrops danced on leaves, the coolness on my face. That walk reminded me that joy is not always about doing more. It is often about noticing more. And I had not been noticing anything for a long time. The fourth day, I passed a little girl drawing with chalk on the pavement. She looked up, smiled, and waved. That interaction, so simple, filled my heart. I would have missed it if I had been glued to my phone or drowning in someone else's playlist. These walks were slowly returning me to a version of myself I had not seen in years, the one who notices, who feels, who connects without filters. By the fifth day, I began using the walk as a check-in. I would ask myself simple questions. How am I really feeling today? What do I need right now? Not in a dramatic or therapeutic way, just gently, like a friend would ask. And the answers always came. Sometimes as a feeling, sometimes as a thought, sometimes as just a sense of peace. On the sixth and seventh day, the walk became sacred. It was no longer just a break in the day. It was a bridge back to myself, a reminder that even in a world addicted to noise, silence still has a place. And in that silence I could hear the truth of who I was, what I needed, and how much beauty I had been missing by simply not paying attention. Choosing one task to complete with full attention was not as easy as it sounded. I thought I was good at multitasking. I believed that doing 5 things at once meant I was productive, efficient, even successful. But the truth was, I was exhausted. I would start something, then switch to something else, then check my phone, then remember something I had forgotten, then scroll mindlessly while convincing myself I was still working. And at the end of the day, nothing ever really felt finished. I was doing a lot, but I was not being present for any of it. So I decided to experiment with something different. Just one task, one thing at a time, one moment of full, undivided focus. The first day, I chose something small, folding laundry. Normally, I would put on a podcast or a show in the background, scroll through my phone while folding, get distracted halfway, and then come back to a half-finished pile. But this time, I did it in silence. I focused on the feel of the fabric, the rhythm of folding, the little satisfaction of clean, organized clothes. It was simple, almost boring, but also strangely calming. For those 10 minutes, I was not in a hurry. I was not thinking about what came next. I was just there, doing one thing well. The second day, I chose a work-related task. I turned off notifications, closed all tabs except the one I needed, and told myself, "You're only doing this right now." The first few minutes were hard. My brain kept pulling me toward other thoughts, but I stayed with it. I took a deep breath. I reminded myself that everything else could wait, and slowly I found a rhythm. I got the task done quicker than usual, and more importantly, it felt satisfying. Like I had truly completed something instead of just surviving it. By the third day, I started noticing how scattered my mind had become. It was used to jumping, to chaos, to constant stimulation. No wonder I was always tired. This new way of working, slow, intentional, focused, felt like a detox. I was not doing less. I was just doing better. One thing at a time. And every time I finished a task, no matter how small, it gave me a sense of clarity. A kind of peace that multitasking had never given me. On the 4th and 5th days, I applied this habit to things beyond work. washing dishes, having a conversation, even drinking tea. I realized that presence is not just about productivity. It is about connection. When I gave my full attention to a friend during a call, I could feel the difference. I was not just hearing them. I was truly listening, and they felt it too. The bond grew stronger. The silence became more meaningful. The time felt richer. On the sixth day, I had a tough moment. A lot was going on, and I felt overwhelmed. My usual response would have been to do 10 things at once, thinking that movement would fix the chaos. But I stopped. I chose just one thing. I picked up my notebook and started writing. Just that. Not checking messages, not answering calls, just letting the pen move. And as I focused on that one act, the storm inside began to calm. Not disappear, just soften. By the seventh day, this habit had rewired something in me. I no longer felt the need to rush through my day like it was a race. I started seeing it as a series of moments that deserved my full presence. Even the smallest task became meaningful when I gave it my full attention. I was no longer chasing completion. I was experiencing connection to the task, to the moment, to myself. And that feeling was far more fulfilling than ticking off a list. Repeating one positive affirmation each morning started as something I felt silly doing. I had seen people talk about it, those short, powerful sentences like, I am enough, I am strong, I am worthy, but it always felt a bit too soft, a bit too dreamy. I did not think a sentence could do much when the rest of my life felt like a storm. But I was also desperate for some sense of control. So I picked a phrase, just one, and I whispered it to myself on a morning when I felt anything but strong. I am capable. That was it. Just those 3 words. I did not believe them at first. In fact, I almost laughed, but I said them anyway. I said them while brushing my teeth. I said them while tying my shoes. I said them when I looked in the mirror with tired eyes and messy hair. I said them even though my heart felt heavy. And with each repetition, something started to happen. The words, which felt hollow at first, began to fill up, like they were slowly pouring something back into me. Not loud confidence, not fake positivity, but a kind of steady grounding, like a quiet reminder from someone I had forgotten myself. The second day, I picked a new affirmation. I can handle what today brings. My hands were shaking that morning. I had too much on my mind. Too many what-ifs and not enough answers. But I said it anyway, again and again. And as the day unfolded, I noticed myself reaching for those words when things got hard. I whispered them under my breath, in traffic. I repeated them silently when a difficult message popped up. I was not pretending everything was fine. I was simply giving my mind a thread to hold on to. By the third day, these affirmations started becoming a ritual. I did not have a long list. I did not read them off a screen. I chose one line each morning that felt right. Sometimes it came from a feeling, sometimes from a conversation. Sometimes I just closed my eyes and asked myself, what do I need to hear today? And without fail, the answer would rise. I am calm. I am learning. I deserve peace. These small declarations were not about changing my life overnight. They were about creating small shifts in how I saw myself. The fourth day, I stood in front of the mirror and said, I forgive myself. That one hit differently. My voice cracked. My eyes filled. Because deep down, I knew I had been carrying guilt and shame for things I had never said out loud. That morning, saying those 3 words felt like letting go of something that had been sitting on my chest for too long. It was not about fixing everything. It was about finally being honest. On the 5th and 6th day, The affirmations became a thread that stitched my mornings with intention. I trust the process. I am not my fears. I choose joy. These were not magic spells. They were anchors. And when my day tried to pull me in every direction, I would hold on to that anchor. Just one line, and it was enough to bring me back. By the seventh day, this habit felt like breathing, natural, necessary. It was no longer about changing how the world treated me. It was about changing how I treated myself, with softness, with belief, with a voice that once doubted, now whispering strength. Each affirmation was like watering a seed I did not know I had planted. And slowly, something inside me started to grow. Not loudly, not quickly, but deeply, quietly, in a way that felt real. Sleeping with intention, not exhaustion, was a concept I had never truly understood until I reached a point where I was crashing into bed every night like a machine that had run out of battery. My body was tired, my mind was buzzing, and my heart was restless. Sleep was not something I looked forward to. It was something I collapsed into. I thought that was normal. After all, being busy, being drained, being always on had become a badge of honor. But what it really was a slow erosion of peace. So I made a small decision. I would not wait to be completely exhausted to go to bed. I would sleep because I deserved rest, not because I had nothing left to give. The first night I turned off all screens an hour earlier than usual. It felt strange. There was silence where noise usually filled the air. My fingers itched to scroll. My mind kept racing. But instead of reaching for distractions, I lit a small lamp, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on my bed with a book. Not a heavy book, not something to study or analyze, just something gentle. My eyes were tired, but not from strain, from softness. I fell asleep without realizing it, not with pressure, but with peace. The second night, I added a small ritual, writing down 3 things I wanted to leave behind before sleeping. Not long explanations, just simple words like stress, comparison, or anger. It felt symbolic, like I was giving myself permission to close a chapter, to let the day be done. I was no longer dragging today into tomorrow. I was saying it's okay to rest now. That night, my sleep felt different, deeper, not perfect, but better. I woke up not just less tired, but less tense. By the third night, I noticed that my dreams were gentler. My mind was not at war. I was not waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for my phone, or checking what time it was. I had stopped treating sleep like a shutdown button. I had started treating it like a bridge, something sacred that connected the chaos of the day to the calm of the morning. On the 4th and 5th nights, I began preparing for sleep, like I would for an important meeting. Not because it was serious, but because it mattered. I lowered the lights, cooled the room, even played a little soft sound in the background. A fan, the wind, the sound of rain. My body started understanding the cues. It responded with calmness. My heartbeat slowed. My breathing deepened. It was as if my body was saying, "Thank you. This is what I needed." On the 6th night, I realized how much guilt I had attached to resting. There was always one more thing to do, one more message to reply to, one more reason to keep pushing. But this habit taught me that rest is not the reward for finishing everything. Rest is the right of being human. It does not have to be earned through burnout. It can be chosen with love. By the 7th night, sleep had become a friend again. Not a thief of time, not a forced break, but a kind visitor that helped me heal, helped me recover, helped me begin again. I started saying a soft phrase to myself before closing my eyes. I did my best today. And whether the day was messy or magnificent, that line gave me closure. I no longer entered sleep like a soldier returning from war. I entered it like someone returning home, ready to be held by the quiet, ready to trust the darkness, ready to believe that tomorrow would meet me gently, because tonight I chose to rest with intention.
Beneath the stars we whisper dreams. A violin plays soft, it seems. The night unfolds its velvet wings. We dance on air like fancy things. A crescendo builds with every beat. Our hearts, they dance in perfect heat. The world is ours in silent screams. We're floating high on whispering dreams. Together we are one sweet song. The night won't be too late, too long. Our melody will carry on in every note where we belong. The orchestra, it swells to life. The strings, they cut the dark like a knife. Your voice an echo in my soul. In every verse we find the gold.